Yes, good morning, and another super welcome back to Classic Dirt Bike TV. And as you can see, we're out and about in the fresh air once again. And today we've made that journey to Slamannan near Falkirk to hold round 4 of the Scottish Classic Club's 2024 Racing Championship. Now it's about 7 o'clock here in the morning, and as you can see, the paddock and the track behind me is absolutely covered in a blanket of fog, so there's not much to see with regards this time of the morning, but hopefully that Scotch mist will lift by the time we get round to putting bikes onto the track. Now 2024 is, to say the least, not been a great year for the Scottish Classic Club, because they've already had 3 rounds cancelled this year due to various reasons, and in fact our last and final event of 2024, which was due to be held at Whitekirk in East Linton at the end of September, has now unfortunately been cancelled as well, and that's been due to the landowner selling that particular piece of ground that the track was run on. So the old Scottish Classic Motorcycle Racing Club Committee, I've certainly got some head scratching to do to lay out a race programme with new venues for 2025. Right, so today, if we ever get round to any racing and if the fog lifts, we'll hope to bring you races from the old vintage pre-65s and pre-68 bikes. We've also got some nice lineups of bikes for the pre-75s and of course, those pre-1984 or twin shot bikes as they were known. So there's quite a lot of racing to get through here at Slamannan. Now, after this event here at Slamannan, Classic Dirt Bike TV will actually be off the air for a few weeks, because I'm heading over to the USA, to sunny Florida, yippee, to take in some well-earned R&R. So I'm looking forward to getting some of the old currant bun on my coupon before the end of the year. But of course, when we return, we'll be bringing you more of those old classic dirt bikes to keep you going through the closed winter shutdown. Right, so let's do our usual and head back to the paddock, if indeed we can actually see some bikes through the mist. But shortly after that, hopefully, we'll get down to the racing. So let's head back to the paddock and take a look at some of those bikes that are soon to take part at this last and final round of the Scottish Classic Championship, right here at Slamannan. So let's just take a look at our very first machine, which is John Porteous's 1976 CZ 400. And this is a bike that used to belong to another local racer from Northern Ireland called Trevor Calderwood. Now, John told me that this bike was originally a machine that was built for Jiri Stoiduka to ride at the 2017 Hangtown CZ World Championships in the USA, and Trevor was so impressed with this bike when he saw it over there in the States that he immediately made an offer and bought it, and then had it shipped back to Northern Ireland. And because Trevor already has quite a big collection of classic scramblers, he's then sold this bike on to John Porteous. Now, of course, you can see almost immediately that this is not a fully original 1976 bike, because many of these old Czechoslovakian racers these days aren't fully original, and it does have a few trick parts on this machine to make it handle and ride that little bit better. But there's certainly no denying that it's still a very nice piece of kit. So the bike's powered by a 400cc reed valve 2-stroke engine, and straight away you can see that this particular power plant's had the now common gear shifter conversion, which simply replaces the very long throw that you used to get from these Czechoslovakian motors, and by fitting this upgraded linkage system, it makes the engine transmission changes very smooth and very slick, and some people even say it's far superior to any kind of Japanese motorcycle shifter. And on the spark side of the engine, you can see that it's been upgraded as well with a much more modern CDI electronic ignition unit. And actually a lot of the upgrades and engine work on this motor has been carried out by 3L Race Engineering, who certainly know how to get the best out of these Czechoslovakian engines. So again, they're quite a good source of contact if you need any advice or engine work done on your old CZ motors. And again, you can see here that it looks like the original owner of this bike's resisted the temptation to remove some of the cylinder fins on the motor's barrel, which is another one of those quite common upgrades on these CZ engines. Now, our particular CZ400 special here doesn't have the original CZ front forks in it, and these forks here, although they may look like they could be Italian Marzoccas, they are in fact Seriani forks, which is quite unusual to see on one of these Czechoslovakian racers. But we still have the old school CZ drum brakes at the front, and as I remember, I think these old school drums were quite good stoppers for these two-stroker CZs. And here at the back end of our 1976 CZ, obviously it's not got the original shocks for a 48-year-old machine, and the original shocks that were on this bike have been replaced by these very nice Falcon shocks, and I can certainly vouch for these shocks because I did have a similar pair on the back of my old 440 Michael. And again, it's a replacement alloy swing arm here to replace what would have been the tubular steel swing arm on the original bike from 76. And once more, I'm pretty sure that this fuel tank is from another model of CZ. I don't think this is from the 1976 bike, but a nice fuel tank nonetheless. But we'll maybe take a closer look at this bike of John's in a future video here on CDB TV. So this was another nice bike that I managed to snap during my Paddock walkabout. And this is Sam Sibl's Tt500 Yamaha 4-stroker, and this is a bike that Sam's been building through the last few months, and this is his standby bike. You can see Sam's race bike there, number 24 in the background. So this is a bike that Sam brought along just in case he had some problems with his original race bike. But from what I can gather, it's a proper TT frame, swing arm and engine, of course. And I'm pretty sure that this engine is just a standard 500. I don't think it's been modified in any way, but with these big TT500s, you don't really need to modify them because they do have a certain amount of grunt in their standard trim. But Sam definitely likes his big 4-stroke thumpers. Now, up here at the front of Sam's thumper, we have, I think, these forks. I'm sure he told me that these were from a YZ 250 Yamaha, so you can see that she's got quite long legs for a big 4-stroker, and of course the standard Yamaha hubs and front drum brake as well, which, as I can remember, again were quite good stoppers for their day. And as we move on to the back end of Sam's TT500, it's a nice pair of alloy-bodied rock shocks. Another good quality pair of rear suspension units. But another nice looking motorcycle, and as far as I'm led to believe, I don't think Sam had the opportunity to race the bike on the day, so luckily his original TT managed to survive most of the races on the day. But another lovely 500 thumper from Sam Sibl. Now, as usual at this round 4 event at Strathallan, there was no shortage of Honda red rockets around the paddock, and this is Chad Stevenson's 1979 example. And again, you can see it's not a fully original bike because many of these old red rockets aren't these days, but nevertheless this bike of Chad's is a lovely example of one of these super quick two-stroke 250s. Now at the back end of the bike you can see that it's not got the original steel swing arm, but it's been replaced by a nice lighter alloy unit, which as I remember I think was a PFR swing arm, or Pro Form Racing. But and here we have the power plant for the red rocket, that lovely reed valve two-stroke engine with that fire engine red paint job. And this engine here certainly looks like it's still got its original red patina from the late 1970s. And naturally this bike is never going to have its original exhaust. It's still intact, so it's been replaced by this lovely sculpted fresco expansion chamber. And just to complement that pipe, we've got this PFR alloy tailpipe here at the back as well. So you can see that Chad has certainly fitted quite a few PFR parts to his Honda Red Rocket. But it's always amazed me why organisations or clubs haven't actually started up a 250 Honda Red Rocket race series, because there's no shortage of these bikes going around. There is plenty to start a racing series, so maybe, who knows, in the future maybe some of the clubs or organisations will maybe start up a Honda 250 Red Rocket race series. But at the back of Chad's bike we have what you can see is a pair of those Fox air shocks, which again were quite prevalent during the 1970s. But of course this is just one of the many bikes that you'll be able to see strutting their stuff on the racetrack when we eventually get around to posting all of the racing footage from this Scottish Classic Round 4 event. So there you have it, another fine example of a red rocket. That's Chad Stevenson's 250 race bike. So next up, it's an old British classic, and this is Charlie Robertson's Matisse 500 matchless. Now this bike here, of course, does belong to Charlie Robertson, but due to Charlie's ongoing health issues, he's unable to ride this bike nowadays. So Charlie gives the bike to young Andrew King to enable Andrew to race this bike on his behalf. But Charlie was certainly one of the top riders with the Scottish Classic Club back in the day, but this big 500 single cylinder matchless is quite a unique machine, and I do remember Charlie telling me that this engine was built by the great Peter Yates, who is regarded as one of the top matchless engine builders of his time. So Charlie then took the opportunity of renaming this engine his Yetis 500 just to coincide with the engine's builder, Peter Yates. Now, I don't know too much about some of the specs of this race bike, but it does look like it's got one of those ANC gearboxes fitted to it, and of course the usual fiberglass Matisse fuel tank there on the top. But we'll be able to have another look at this bike in action on the track, and we'll be able to see Andrew King riding this bike in some of the classic races when we post the racing footage. But another very unique British classic, Charlie Robertson's 500 matchless. And while we're at it, we'll take a look at another beautiful British classic, and this is Colin Flockart's 1968 Shenny Victor BSA, and this is a proper old school machine, built of course by the great Eric Sheney. And I do remember Colin was telling me in the paddock that this bike here is possibly coming up for sale very soon. So maybe if you're in the market for a nice British classic, then this is certainly a bike that might fulfill your criteria. But it's a beautiful Shenny built BSA Victor. And you can't beat one of these old British classics with a nice polished alloy, the chrome chassis or nickel plated chassis, and the aluminium polished side panels as well. But this is a lovely example of one of these Eric Sheney racers. And you may remember the great Eric Sheney, who designed these Sheney frames. He used to chalk his designs on his workshop wall, and if he didn't like the look of what he'd just drawn, then he would just simply rub it out and start again. So Eric did that until he was happy with the design that he had on the wall, and then he would just simply transfer that design into metal by bending and shaping all these frame tubes. But there's no question that Colin's Shenny Victor has all the proper parts on it. So this, as far as I know, is 100% Shenny. So maybe if this is the kind of machine that you're in the market for, then keep an eye out, because I think this bike could be coming onto the market quite soon. But as I said, this is proper old school with the polished mudguards and aluminium side panels and the alloy tank. But a lovely example of a Shenny Victor from Colin Flockart. But as I said, there wasn't a shortage of Honda Red Rockets at this Round 4 event. And this beautiful example here is John Miller's 1979 250. And this bike here has just recently undergone a complete nut and bolt restoration by John, and he brought it along for us to take a few pictures with. But we're only going to take a short look at John's bike in this Paddock video, because This is a bike that we have sidelined for a full feature here on CDB TV at a later date. Now, as you can see, John's bike doesn't have every single original part that the bike had in 1979, but it still has all the important parts like the proper swing arm and forks, etc. And the exhaust again has been swapped for one of these pattern fresco expansion chambers, but it's been very well done, this bike. It even still has the original carburetor that was fitted to these red rockets back in the day, and I'm looking forward to telling you all about the intricate parts on this lovely machine when we eventually get around to doing a full feature. But it's suffice to say that this engine has been fully rebuilt, and every nut and bolt and seal was replaced among a multitude of other parts on the bike. And as I said, you're never going to have the original expansion chamber still on this bike because it's been replaced, and even the tailpipe here has been substituted for this quite nice alloy fresco silencer. And here at the front end of the bike, it still has its stock original 79 front suspension, and I do remember John telling me that these forks were fully stripped and then re-chromed and rebuilt with brand new internals. And once more at the back end of John's red rocket, the original shocks are no longer in place, and these have been replaced by these high quality YSS classic suspension units, and these are excellent suspension systems for these old twin shock bikes. But as I said, more importantly than that, the bike still sports its original box section steel swing arm, the same swing arm that the bike had from the Honda factory in 1979. But you can see that you don't need me to tell you that there's been quite a lot of work has gone in to the strip down and rebuild of this bike. And as I said, we are going to do a full feature on all of its components and parts in a future video here on my YouTube channel. But it's a beautiful looking machine, a fine example of one of these super quick Honda 250 red rockets from 1979. So my next bike I came across in the paddock was this nice Twinport 360 CZ, and this bike here belongs to Kenny Harper. Now, although Kenny normally rides this bike, he's brought this machine along for Callum Sangster to ride at this event, because Callum will be riding this in the forthcoming classic motocross The Nations in the Czech Republic. And again, you can see that Kenny's Twinport CZ has had the usual upgrade on the gear shifter mechanism, and this mechanism here is being designed and manufactured by Peter Gerard. Now, I'm sure you already know that these CZ two-strokes were a single cylinder, but you had these twin exhaust ports with a pipe either side of the engine. And on this model here, it goes into a single exhaust on the left-hand side of the bike, whereby the originals would have had two silencers that ran down either side of the engine. And this replacement expansion chamber is a stock standard bolt-on replacement to what would have been the original CZ twin silencer setup. Now, up at the front end of the bike, we have replacement billet alloy triple clamps, and of course that very nice paint job there on the CZ fuel tank with the nice Scotland flag on the top there. So this bike will certainly be flying the flag for Scotland when it attends that Motocross the Nations event in the Czech Republic. And again, Kenny's bike here is not a fully original bike. I think it's made up from a 1965 chassis, and I think the engine is from 1964. But nevertheless, it's a lovely looking machine, and we're looking forward to seeing this bike on the track when we post the racing footage, which will be coming up very soon. But this was another quite rare and interesting machine that I came across. This is Brian Atkinson's 1975 MR 250 Elsinore. Now, from what Brian told me on the day, this is an American spec MR 250. It's basically an enduro version of what would have been the old 250 Honda Elsinore. And naturally, when this bike first arrived in 1975, it would have had lights on the front of the bike and a light at the rear, so it could be used on or off-road. But it's certainly one of the very first MR 250s that I've ever come across. So again, another quite rare and interesting machine. Now, with regards to the power plant for the MR250, I think it was basically the same sort of engine setup as the CR Elsinores, although I think these engines did have different gearing inside, obviously to be enable them to be used as enduro bikes rather than full-on off-road motocrossers. So I'm assuming that these little MR250s weren't available in the UK, as this was an American spec of machine. And I do remember Brian also telling me that the frame, although he's had it painted since he's had the bike, he's never had to do any kind of repairs or anything to the chassis, so it must be quite a nice, strong, sturdy chassis in these MR 250s. But at first glance you can see how similar this engine looks to the old CR 250 Elsinores, but of course the main difference I think is inside the engine's transmission. Here at the front, I can only assume that these forks will be much the same as the forks that would have been fitted to the Elsinores back in 1975. And as we move on to the back end of the bike, obviously the original 1975 shocks that would have been fitted to this MR250 are now long gone and are substituted for a much more modern pair of suspension units. Now, the fuel tank, I can only assume again, is the same as the alloy ones that were fitted to the Elsinores, but these ones, of course, have got a different paint job, and it looks like Brian's fitted his own style of handlebars, grips and levers to the front end of the bike. But for me, personally speaking, I have to say that this is the very first time I've encountered one of these MR 250s, and it's nice to see something different for a change. And this was a lovely example of one of these American spec MR250s from Brian Atkinson. So look forward to seeing this bike again perform on the racetrack. Now, these two lovely 1988-89 Italian Kaja 125s were, for me, the two bikes that stole the show at this round 4 event at Strathallan. Now, not only is it super rare to see one of these Kajivas even in the flesh, it's even rarer to see two of these bikes still being used as weekend racers. And this lovely couple of examples here are certainly in fine condition. Now, both of these bikes were being raced by the two brothers of James and Stuart Newby, who I think travelled from the south of the country to Strathallan to race these couple of Italian stallions. And I must say it's been quite a while since I've actually come across one of these rare Kajivas, and I was quite chuffed when two of them turned up on the same day. Now, both of these bikes are powered by this super compact liquid-cooled Kajiva two-stroke reed valve engine. And I have to admit that I have seen the 250 version of this bike in the past, but this is the first time I've ever come across a pair of these rare 125s. And again, we're not going to go into too much detail about this pair of beauties at this point, because we're almost certainly going to do a long and full feature on both of these bikes at a later date here on my classic Dirt Bike TV channel. Now, of course, both of the bikes have white power suspension systems on both the front end and here at the rear. And at the front forks, we have a pair of 4054 white power upside down suspension units, which, as I remember, were quite good suspension units for the late 1980s. And as we move on to the rear of both bikes, they are fitted with this single pot rear disc brake, and of course that quite simple box section style rear swing arm as well. And again, these Kajivas were surrounded by plenty plastic bodywork, because this was the late 1980s, and of course they had these plastic air scoops to direct the airflow into the radiators that were situated at either side of the front frame down tube. But these little 125 liquid-cooled Kajiva motors were little buzz bombs, and they were certainly quick on the track in their day. And as I said, you can see both of these bikes taking part in this round 4 event when we post all of the racing footage. But what a pair of classics, and it's nice to see more of these Italian bikes taking to the track, because these two pair of bikes would look fantastic in anybody's collection just as showpieces, but to have them actually at the track and taking part in the racing was certainly something special. So look forward to seeing both of these bikes in action coming soon. But as I said, this was just a very small sample of the many bikes that were at this round 4 event. And of course you can see these 2 bikes in action on the track when we post our racing footage from this round 4 event at Strathallan. So I do hope you will join me to take a look at that when you can see both of these very nice Kajivas in action on the track. But once again, thanks for tuning in to Classic Dirt Bike TV. But until the next time, it's cheerio for now.